Hello everybody, it's Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. What number are we, Adrian? Number 148.
Yeah. Last week was the snooker week. Well, it was for some. Because it was, let me just, it's 147 is the highest break you can get in snooker.
Okay.
Actually, you can get a higher one, but we won't go into that.
Okay.
Anyway, that was nothing.
Well, it pales, doesn't it? Because
does,
this
yeah.
week, of course, it's Good Friday again. And we were trying to work it out. We think it's our fourth Good Friday since we started.
Well, we've just been sitting here going 20, 21, 22, 23.
Yeah.
So that's four.
Yeah.
Four, including when we were doing the...
No Shore in Sight.
No Shore in Sight,
and that's what I
yeah.
was thinking about. A beautiful April and so much death. And here we are, and we're thinking about Good Friday and the death of Jesus. And I don't know what effect this one has had on you, but one of the things I've been thinking of is just trying to get myself into the mind of the crowd and what they saw. And I had the oddest memory, Adrian. It's nothing to do with Good Friday, but it's to do with a drama exercise. It was a sort of drama workshop, and it was an all-age drama workshop. And I was just there helping to facilitate it. I wasn't actually leading it. And the guy leading it said, I want you to get into pairs and I want you to look closely at each other's faces and just concentrate, calm right down and meditate on the face you see in front of you. Well, I had a 7-year-old I was paired with, and we stared at each other's faces for some time. And then the guy leading the workshop said, what do you see? And I said all sorts of things. You know, I saw a sparkle in his eyes and I saw this and the other. And he said, I just see lots of wrinkly lines, really. And I don't know, talk about illusion. No, the point was he was looking intently and he saw.
Yes,
he saw who I was. And I was thinking about that and thinking, what did the crowd see when they were crowding the streets, maybe pushing for a view of Jesus?
Can I just say, just remember, there was a lady in a group we spoke to a long time ago who announced, "You're not very good looking, are you?" To
no,
me.
we did talk about
that.
that.
I know we did. Yeah, anyway, go on.
Well, I mean, I suppose I was wondering what the crowds, what they saw, and what I thought, what do they see? He had been locked away with people who could do whatever they wanted to do to him. So what did they see?
Well, do you think people, I mean, they had no video, TV, no telephones, no images. So I hadn't thought about this till this moment when you said that. I mean, they must have thought it'd be really interesting to see what he's like.
Well, exactly.
Because they would have no idea.
Well, I don't know, because a lot of them would have seen him, you see. This is what I think. Yeah. They would have seen Jesus coming in on a donkey. They'd have heard he was a miracle maker, so they would have created an image of him. But now what do they see? I mean, he probably had blackened eyes. He will have had matted blood on his back, on his face, on his head. This crown of thorns, we're told. What did they see? And I mean, did they think, oh, well, I may have believed him in the past, but it was obviously a scam. Here's somebody getting his just desserts. He's a fraud. I mean, is that, what do you think?
It's very hard to know. I mean, I always try to put myself in other people's heads and think what I would have thought. I mean, if I'd been to his entrance, coming into on the donkey and everybody cheering and all that stuff, would that have held me in my regard for him, or would I have thought, oh no, look, it's like everything else, it looks good, and then
well, that's what worries me.
Apart.
That's what worries me. You see, what we are so easily taken in by what we are shown. I think that's what I was thinking. So this image that they are now seeing projected to these crowds is as much of a false image as so much stuff that we see on TV and whatever. Because the abuse has physically created a false image.
Well, that's true, but in that age, of course, the same thing applied to his entrance. I mean, you see him looking for once as though he's been enjoying himself and on top of the world, because the thing he's come to do is being done. And then you see him beaten and mashed up and in a terrible state. I find it very confusing. I really, really do. I don't know. I suppose things were simpler then.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know whether they were simpler. What I suppose I was finding myself thinking was how often I have been taken in by what might well be false news. I've read the image, maybe with words and with pictures, and I've looked, and I have joined with relief, if you like, to the crowd, because now it was safe. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to debate it. I now have decided with the newspapers or with the television reports that somebody who they are saying is bad is bad.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't sound like you, actually. You usually look for all positive and redeeming features, so I don't know, but I know that we at least once in our lives have had our view of somebody torn apart. I think we've mentioned it before, I won't go into it now, but we've seen one view we had rather similarly in a way of the best suddenly turn into the dismal, almost worst you could think of. And it leaves you sitting thinking both of those things happened. What do I do with them? What do I do with them? But we do, I think, nowadays, and we've been hearing this on the news and with debate about various things, people do want things more in black and white than they have done for a very long time, I think. Is that because everyone's a bit insecure after the COVID stuff or something like that?
Well, it may be. I mean, that would be the first time that sort of continual news of death was on our news and in our faces, if you like. And there is a lot of insecurity around. I mean, in the UK, we've got strikes going on all over the place. Our NHS, our wonderful NHS, is struggling in a way that I can't remember ever hearing it struggle before. And our politics seems to be quite confused. And I don't know, maybe that is why we need, like we've said before, we need a bit of solid rock. And if our solid rock isn't the ever-changing, wonderful solid rock of Jesus, then we are likely to want something solid and to believe what we're told, because that's easier.
You might well say, well, we need to look like that 7-year-old who talked about your face. We might want to say we should look like that and tell the truth, but that's not all the truth, is it? It's not.
What do you mean?
Simple as that. Well, to say I can see this, and this about this person.
No, but
there are cases where our eyes have been closed to terrible things that have happened. We know that.
Yes.
Within certain branches of the church.
Yes.
For sure.
Well, we've talked about the Metropolitan Police, and that's now the figures are terrifying as to the number of people who might well be losing their jobs now because of these things.
By the way, while we're on that, I did want to say, I was thinking today, I would like to just momentarily go back and say well done to all police officers in the Met who have not given in to that.
Yes.
Because we know there are many, many people who are absolutely appalled by what has happened. So thank you to them, and we're sorry you have to go through
that. And community police who go lots of extra miles. I mean, certainly in our local area, I know that there are police who make sure they come to the food bank for some of the people that have been taken into custody temporarily and then released, realising that their main problem is poverty and mental health problems. No, of course. But I suppose because of thinking about Good Friday and of Jesus on that road and thinking about how many people will have believed what they saw on that day. And so often, I mean, we've worked, haven't we, with children and adults who've ended up presenting in a very disturbing way. And if you only look at what is on the surface, you will only see something that the bit that's gone wrong. What was it you used to say about children that went through that cycle?
Broadly speaking, and it is only broadly speaking, the kids I worked with, particularly the more disturbed ones, went through what we always called the sad, mad, bad
yes.
Sequence, which means that at first people thought, oh, sad child, difficult home, how difficult for him or her.
Yeah.
Then they think, well, they're disturbed, nothing's changing, and what are we going to do? And we start a barrage of things that will try to change their outlook and their mind and their emotional health and all those things. If that fails, and they then do something dreadful, as sadly many of the kids have, who I work with, suddenly they're bad. And not many people go back down the road and say, how did we get here? How could we have moved from such profound sympathy?
That's right. Why, when they were at the sad point, were they not heard?
Yeah.
The things that have happened behind closed doors to so many people in their lives. And by closed doors, I don't automatically mean within a family or within an institution, but within a situation that is apparently closed, things happen. If you really look and you see the sadness, or you really look at the mental health problem and you see the madness, then you won't just see the badness, if you understand me.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what I was thinking about. Do we question, or do we simply...
We had a thing recently from somebody who was wrestling with these things.
We did. Just part of his email. Do you want to read a little bit? I mean, they have a quite a complicated situation with an adopted child who's got something that would be described as that some churches would talk as being an issue. That's fair enough, isn't it?
He says they've been judged for their support of a complicated child, and with that would also evaporate any hope of influencing a change on its LGBT stance. To some extent, he says, the reason I don't get to church all that often is because it's not easy having kids with disabilities. I need to be home for them. But the church doesn't presumably he means his church, doesn't understand that.
He does mean a particular church, because actually there's another church that's very understanding.
He says, we have an amazing specialist psychiatrist for our son who says that he is the most complex patient he's ever had. And she says many marriages would not have survived what we've been through. So well done you, is what I say.
Well,
what a struggle.
That's right. And I was thinking about him, and I was thinking... this business of accepting appearances. I mean, do we try and look beyond appearances and support families who clearly are, there's a positive, support the positive struggle that takes place behind closed doors, or are we happier just to go with what we see and to close? I don't know.
I think one of the methods of control that we use in organisations, like the church as well, quite often, is to, when we find there are things happening that would be in the bad area, we say, well, there we are then.
Yes.
And the usual ways of pursuing this aren't, and that's ridiculous. I mean, Jesus' way was to get with people, look into what was happening to them, and then maybe say something very straight and quite alarming, or something very warm and forgiving and comforting. But it's getting the right thing to say.
But will the people in the crowd remember that? Will they remember the stories they've heard about the good things that Jesus did, said, and was, or will they see something that they feel therefore he can't be that. We must have got it wrong. Those stories we heard
I
must
expect
have
so.
got it wrong.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they would. The authorities have caught him. They've done horrible things to him. He's being
Therefore-
punished. Therefore, we've got it wrong.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we have to look elsewhere. In fact, we know some people
Yeah.
did turn away because...
And I think in
because
a
of what
way
happened to him.
that's why, we hear of many churches take very seriously the concept of watching during the night of Thursday, of Maundy Thursday.
Yeah.
The idea being that you will be with Jesus during those hours when he was behind closed doors, when he was being beaten and abused and ridiculed.
Yeah.
And not only that, maybe, but also think about prisoners who are imprisoned for their faith, going through the same thing, but without the power to stop it if they wanted to. And yet, you were thinking about Wurmbrand, weren't you? That
Wurmbrand, yeah.
What did I say?
Well, it doesn't matter. Richard Wurmbrand, yeah.
And what were you? You were saying that he did have the power to stop it in a
Well,
way.
Jesus had the power to stop. Apparently, he could have said, if I wanted, I could ask the Father to send whatever many legions of angels to clear this lot up, but he didn't. Richard Wurmbrand was in prison for 14 years because he wouldn't deny his faith and could have done and probably could have got out. And if you ever get round to reading his book, Sermons in Solitary Confinement, it's a very harrowing read. But it's a story of a man who, like Jesus, in many ways said, here I am in a place where this is what I am. I can't get out. I can't escape because I have committed to the road I'm on and I'm staying on it. And it makes them angrier and angrier and angrier, these people who want to change me and not allow the world to be changed by me or by the person I follow. There's no warm, good side to that.
No.
It is the pits to be in that position sometimes.
So maybe it was an opportunity, certainly for some people, to watch with Jesus, but also to think of the suffering of those who don't have the power to get out of their situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Suffering of loved ones and neighbours and people we'll never meet who...
I think the ones we'll never meet and we don't know about are really important, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this whole period of... Because, we're talking to you early on Friday, probably that's when you're listening to this, and the watching, the idea always was that it was until the point where Jesus says it is finished and gave up his spirit. And there was, in an email we had this week, Adrian, there was a quote from Teresa of Avila. And she's talking about watching, the person writing the email, talking about taking a period of the night where she will be awake. And Teresa of Avila said, I will look at him and he will turn and look at me. And I thought, in that crowd, if you were really looking at him and seeing him as he was, and he turned, what would that mean for him? We've talked about his mum at the cross. We've talked about, looking and seeing somebody who's on your side. Yeah. And how important that is, really.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it, to look at him at his lowest and be with him despite everything. Yeah.
And I know some people use the Anglican church service that's from Compline. They're beautiful words, aren't they?
They are. Keep watch, dear Lord, with those who work or watch or weep this night. Give your angels charge over those who sleep. Tend the sick, Lord Christ. Give rest to the weary, bless the dying, soothe the suffering, pity the afflicted, shield the joyous, and all for your love's sake. And even if he doesn't do all that, and he doesn't, he will be with them in some way that is very difficult for us to understand.
Yeah. I mean, that's just part of Compline, isn't it? But so particularly relevant maybe for this time that we allow ourselves to really look at, like that child looked at me, really look at those who are struggling at the moment. And in doing that, we are surely watching with Jesus.
Yeah, I guess we are. Yeah.
And now we're at Good Friday proper. And this business of looking and really seeing, you've always been affected, so have I, by the poem by Stoddick Kennedy.
Well, by
you
lots
love
of his poems,
Yes.
but and his life. But yeah, this one a lot of people will know. And this is only part of it. When Jesus came to Birmingham, they simply passed him by. They never hurt a hair of him. They only let him die. For men had grown more tender, and they would not give him pain. They only just passed down the street and left him in the rain. Still Jesus cried, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And still it rained, the winter rain, that drenched him through and through. The crowds went home and left the streets without a soul to see. And Jesus crouched against a wall and cried for Calvary. It's a very Kennedy type poem. Takes you beyond where you are and down below where you were, to think of things that can seem unthinkable at times.
When would this have been written, Adrian? Sort of around the time of the Second World War and
probably,
afterwards?
Yeah, 50s, 40s, 50s.
And I was just thinking about how, in a way, we've moved even further from that. I mean, I was looking to see whether there was a service today on TV, actually. And I'm not saying there isn't, but what struck me was when I looked, it said celebrate Good Friday with some rather good TV programs.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my goodness, some rather good TV. Let's celebrate. And I
think people just don't know what it's about,
No,
do they?
because
it's the word good that
yes,
confuses people.
But maybe, like that 7-year-old peering up my face, or actually like our 3-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to tell the story again. I know some people will have heard it, but it's to do with looking and seeing, isn't it? And not passing him by,
to do
or
with
passing
actually
the whole thing
taking
by.
in what you see. I'll tell it briefly because we haven't too much time, but we were in France on holiday and we were in a big church in Dieppe. And I came across Kate as a very little girl, standing.
She's about 3, wasn't she?
Standing very squarely like little girls do, standing looking at a statue of Mary holding her son's body, life-size and ground level. And she asked me what the hole in his side was, and I tried to explain, and she asked why there were holes in his feet, and I did my best with that. And then I knew what she'd say next. She'd say, what about his hands? Why are there holes in his hands? And I had to tell her, so I said, well, see that cross up there with the man on it? That's Jesus. And they nailed him to the cross, which was made of wood. And she went over and laid her face down on his knee and put her arm round him and said, poor Jesus. And it was so pure and so not to do with anything else.
No.
And I love to think that wherever Jesus was then, he's thinking, oh, that's so good. So good.
So maybe we just need to keep our eyes genuinely open and watch and be in the memory of Jesus this Good Friday. And in the memory and think about all those who we maybe can't help, but who Jesus will be aware of.
And is in them.
And is in.
Yeah. Okay. See you next week. Bye-bye.